Hi everyone. In last class and in preparation for the essay, I mentioned the need to avoid jargon. Some students stated that they didn't know how to write without using it, so this short message aims to address this problem. Now let's begin with what jargon is. Jargon consists of technical words or phrases which are used in a particular field. People within an industry know and use these words when interacting with others. Confusion often sets in, however, when people attempt to communicate to those outside of their field. Common people do not often understand these words. As a rule, it's better to avoid using them and instead find easier, more common words to use when communicating with the general public. So imagine that you are doing business and you come across the following phrase: socially responsible investing. And you wonder, what is that? So you go to Wiki and it says the following. In general, socially responsible investors encourage corporate practices that promote environmental stewardship, consumer protection, human rights, and diversity. There are a lot of words and phrases here that are difficult to understand, like environmentally, stewardship, or diversity. I mean, you got to know what these words mean. That's a funny pop-up. Like environmental stewardship or diversity. I mean, you got to know what these words mean in order to explain the original phrase. I don't know why we are given these definitions. Isn't the point of good communication to make things easier to understand? But this is confusing. So why not write in plain language? You could write something like this. Basically, socially responsible investors help businesses to protect the environment, while also defending human rights and encourage people to get along with each other. This definition is much easier to understand. It explains everything without having to define other strange ideas like environmental stewardship or diversity. A good definition really shouldn't require a person to look up every word in the explanation. Now let's look at one accounting term used in this present course. This course uses a number of technical phrases, but of course the word cost allocation is often used most of all. And a definition is: cost allocation is a method to determine the cost of services provided to users of that service. It does not determine the price of the service, but rather determines what the services cost to provide. Again, this is really confusing. If I read this in a book, I'd throw the book away or I'd fall asleep. Let's look at another definition. Assignment of indirect costs or cost objects without arbitrary apportionment. Costs can be allocated where the amount to be assigned can be determined accurately. Wow, this definition is even worse than the first. Now I have to look up all those highlighted words. If I read these words in a report, I think I'd be sick. Even if I was a CEO of a company and I'd once taken accounting, I'm not sure these words would be in my working memory. I'd have forgotten them long ago. I think a better thing for a writer to do is just to use their own words, like this. Cost allocation is a method of accounting of assigning to each product or service the contribution of each employee or department. This sentence is short, concise, and succinct, and it uses ordinary words. Now let's look at how one might use such sentences in their writing. After all, writing is more than simply defining as found in the example above. One has to consider the context. There are a number of ways of including definitions within one's writing, and here I will provide some examples. Say one wants to define a word but does not want to emphasize it. One can do something like this. Accountants typically assign a value to each product created so we can determine how much money each department has contributed. This is called cost allocation. Here the writer defines before giving a head word with cost allocation. One is emphasizing accountants rather than the allocation process. And the sentence would likely continue to talk about accountants. One can also use a relative clause as seen here. Understanding the cost allocation process is important in accounting. which involves assigning a value to each product created so as to determine how much money each department has contributed. The important point in each of these sentences is to add one's definition in the text in a way that does not stop the reader. They add information or remind the reader. Remember, the readers and listeners in speeches quickly forget things. It is important to help them understand what you're trying to say. Now, a word on word count. People often complain, if I use my own words, the definition will be longer. And we have a word limit. After all, even me, the teacher, I use more words. And you can see this here. Before it was 18 words, and I changed it, and it became longer, 24 words. Well, the answer to the problem is to edit. Okay, I can take out these words, which I've highlighted, 24 words, and my result now here is actually 14 words. The final result of the sentence is shorter and clearer. Now let's look back at cost allocation. They too can be edited. Here I had 25 words. I can reduce this down to 22. The other sentence, I had 29 words, and it can be reduced to 26. So we can see that editing can reduce the word count while also allowing the basic meaning to remain intact. So the point of this mini lecture is simply that we need to edit, remove jargon, make things succinct, and make our definitions part of our writing as opposed to being opposite to it. Hopefully you have found this information useful.